I need some traction. You need some traction.
So yeah, my name's Garrett Devinga. I work for Bloomberg News. I cover tech, based in Toronto, from Vancouver. Good to be home. This is Daniel Sachs from AppDirect, and we'll just jump right into it. But maybe if you could just quickly introduce AppDirect and what you do, and kind of the stage in your journey you're at right now.
Yeah, sounds great. So AppDirect was founded with the vision of making it really easy for businesses to find, buy, and manage the cloud solutions they need to succeed. I'm originally from St. Catharines, Ontario. Went to McGill. I'm a McGill pin right here, and proud to be back in Canada.
Well, I want to jump into the topic, but I want to start with like a little bit of like a, just Canadian tech stuff that's going on right now. You said you're from St. Catharines, which is a big branch plant for the auto industry, and there's been sort of some people kind of, the latest in this whole thing of Canada tech versus US tech, Canada's place in the world is sort of, we had some criticism in the media of like Justin Trudeau going to Microsoft and being like, you guys are great for hiring people here in Vancouver that eventually just get shipped to the Valley once their visas come in. And there's some controversy whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I know you have an office in Canada as well, but your HQ is in San Francisco. So, what do you think about that? I mean, is that like, should we be pushing more for having HQs in Canada, or is it still a big benefit when we do have maybe secondary offices or development offices based in Canada?
Yeah, so I think first of all, it's great having a prime minister so active in the tech scene. Justin was actually in a class of mine at McGill. We took a geography class together. But awesome to have the kind of global level awareness on tech. And from our perspective, we were two Canadians who founded the company out of an apartment in San Francisco, are headquartered in San Francisco, but we're about 550 people now, and this year is the first year that over half of our headcount's in Canada. We opened up our first organic office in Montreal in 2014, and now have like hundreds of people across Canada. We have done three acquisitions in Canada, one in Ottawa, one in Montreal, and one in Calgary. And then we've organically hired a ton of amazing engineers. And what I'd say is it's so phenomenal to see the caliber of talent in Canada. However, in 2009, if we would have started in, let's say, St. Catharines or somewhere in Canada, we would not have been where we are today. So I would say when you think about it from an economy perspective, we've done much more for the Canadian economy based on the fact that we started in San Francisco than if we were to have started in Canada.
Okay.
So that's my take.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's jump into the topic, which is we're talking about landing big enterprise deals. So if you're an enterprise startup, obviously you want to have those big customers, and that's where the growth and the money is largely coming from. I mean, a big conversation we're having in Toronto right now is the banks. Like, why aren't the banks spending more money on products developed by startups? And Canadian banks largely incentivized against risk, and so a lot of the time there's actually like structural things within the companies that say you can't buy product from a company that's young or small or something like that. And I mean, you obviously had this issue when you were starting. How did you have that conversation, and how did that go? How did you get over that?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple things there. When we were two people in an apartment, our focus was to make money from day one. And what we said is, how do you make as much revenue from the onset? It's probably signing a really big deal. So all of our focus went into making ourselves appear mature, permanent, long-standing, to get the confidence to sign a big deal. Our first deal was actually with Bell Canada, who everyone knows here. And at the time, if we went to any VC, they would have said, "You're crazy. There's not a chance you're going to be able to sign, one of the biggest companies in Canada." And what we said is, okay, in order to do this, we need to really look like we have something special and that we're giving something that they can't get from anyone else. So what we did is we spent a lot of time establishing the methodology and the thought leadership around cloud, and why telcos would be well suited to service cloud, and why AppDirect was the best opportunity for Bell. And I think one of the challenges in the startup ecosystem is that a lot of people, when they're starting, is they want to be hackerish, they want to be casual, but that doesn't fit with enterprise culture. So what we did was actually the opposite. We wore suits and ties every day. We printed decks that were like consulting style, old school, and we micromanaged the quality of those decks. We used to learn, and I used to interview people that worked at telcos and like government and all those traditional industries to kind of get a sense of what their culture was like. Right. And we totally adopted for their culture. So one of the things we came up with in the early days was the notion of a culture karma chameleon. So how do you adapt to the companies you're working with? And that was so much a part of how we evolved.
Right. So just be like a student of the industry that you're trying to break into and figure out how they think.
Exactly, and when it comes down to banking, you mentioned the financial service industry. That's definitely one of the least least risky companies. They're going to be really conservative. They're going to really think about how they can protect themselves. So even for us, like we had a long-term vision of how we'd enter the financial service space, but it took us years to get the credibility. So what I'd say is, if you're targeting big companies, you have to really learn and assess: are they willing to take risks? And then the other thing is, a big company may have hundreds of thousands of employees. So you have to look at, okay, are there innovative groups within this big company that can help take risk? So if you look at most Fortune 500 companies today, almost every single one has either a venture person that's interested in early stage investment or an innovation group that wants to learn about tech. So you can use them as a catalyst to get intros to the broader company. And that's how you kind of balance that innovation and risk.
Right, yeah, I mean, I guess pushing for, like in the UK, they have this sandbox model where if you are not deemed a systemic risk to the financial system, you can kind of like do what you want and kind of be outside of the regulatory framework a little bit. So, I mean, I guess just doing that on a small scale and saying, okay, maybe you're not going to adopt this, enterprise-wide, but is there like a department that might be willing to take this on to start out with, right?
Exactly, and I think that so much of this is just encouraging a culture of innovation. And I'd say that any CEO, no matter how mature the company is, no matter how mature the person is, they know that their companies are going to be disrupted by technology, and they need to take action. Those that don't will be left behind. So I think a lot of the sales positioning, when you're, let's say, a younger tech company or pretty nascent selling to a bigger company, is highlighting that risk. So highlighting, here's where the market's going, here's how technology is disrupting your company, here's the research or unique value that we know that you don't, and now let's work together to really address your long-term
You
value.
got to like flip the narrative from like we're risky to like no, we're the safe bet for a risky future.
Yeah,
right?
and we can help you in the long term.
Yeah. Was there like a moment that was, because once you have Bell, you tell us like, hey, we want that, we don't care what it costs, and Rogers says the same, and then soon you're all over the place. But before that snowball effect kind of started happening, was there like a breakthrough moment? I guess it was that deal, or was there another one?
Yeah, so I'd say like, just above anything else, one of our advisors, his name's Eric Boyko, he just took his company public, Stingray Digital. It's a massive music company, really cool. But he's this eccentric guy who gave us like instituted values like PMA, which is positive mental attitude, and go, go, go. And one of the things that he said to us in the first year was just first customer, first customer, first customer, first customer, bell, bell, bell. That's all that matters. Don't worry about anything else. And I think you really need to go into tunnel vision. And once you have a good sense of what your first customer is, use them as a case study, embrace them, but then don't give up. So your first customer is the first, and it's risky only having one customer. So it's how do you create the second and the third? And to your kind of notion of the snowball effect, we called that magnetic momentum. So because we got Bell, we were able to get some Canadian SaaS companies that Bell was able to distribute. Then we got telcos in the US like AT&T and Deutsche Telekom. Then we got Microsoft. Then we got IBM. And then that magnetic momentum continues to grow, and it makes it easier for you to grow. So we just saw Domo and the CMO gave an awesome presentation on marketing and growth. But one of the cheapest ways we've found to acquire customers is to have them come inbound to you because they actually respect the value you're creating because of another case study. So that's probably the cheapest way to get people coming to you is when their competitor or when someone they admire is using your stuff. So I think that's really important.
Cool. How are we doing for time? I don't have a timer here, so I don't know where. I'll keep asking, but if someone can like just give me like a sign or something if I have 5 minutes left. Did you ever work at a big enterprise before you started AppDirect?
Not really. So we started AppDirect out of school. I interned at RBC. My co-founder worked at Bain & Company, which is a big management consulting firm. But I always kind of loved to study different use cases and case studies. So always, like I said, interviewed people from bigger companies.
Right. So that's how you kind of got it. But I mean, is there something that when you're servicing, large enterprises, concretely, like things that big companies need from you that maybe you as a startup don't need, or you wouldn't have thought about? I mean, like whether it's like a regulatory thing or something like that.
Yeah, completely. I think the biggest thing is governance. So when you work at a big company, you're going to be working with hundreds of people, and your startup might be only 10 people, right? So if you don't create a framework for how you communicate with those customers, it's going to be almost impossible, and they'll drown you. So you need to say, here's how we'll work together. Here's some methodologies. Hey, we use Jira and Slack, so therefore you need to be aware of how we communicate. So a lot of it's in education and alignment, and that also sometimes has to do with actually executive sponsorship. So making sure that you have relationships senior level within these companies, so if something goes wrong, you can pick up the phone and say, here's what we need. And really honesty and alignment on why things are different between working with a startup is so important. So I'd say that just that awareness is so much of it.
Right. Okay. How much? I mean, I'm sure many of us get the CB Insights email, and Anand is really good at talking about like how big corporates are sort of, they do this like astroturf into like tech, and they talk to startups and they say they're innovative and all that stuff. I mean, is that like a tactic that you can use as a startup to get into larger enterprises? Say like, I mean, or is it kind of disingenuous to say, hey, like, you keep talking about innovation and tech, like here's a way that you can actually do it, and kind of, almost get in from like the marketing angle, and then they can say, oh, we work with AppDirect, like we're hip and cool.
For sure. I mean, I think ultimately when you're working with a big company, you need to add business value. So what I'd say is that the most important thing that you should always be focusing on is how you're going to either save money or address one of their concerns, optimize for revenue, get them new business. So always focus on the business value. But at the highest level, you're right that a lot of companies want to be able to show that they're innovative. One of the ways to do that is to talk about innovative companies they're partnering with. So that's definitely a way to do it, is to get in via the innovation arm and really bridge that gap. So for us, for example, in many of our global customers from Canada and from Europe, we host them in the Valley. We take them on tours of different tech offices like Box and Salesforce and kind of show them around. And that becomes a great way for them to go back to their executive teams and say, here's some of the best practices. And Traction's a great example of that, where last year we co-hosted Traction with Lloyd in San Francisco, and a lot of our client bases who are kind of older, more mature companies got to see the speakers that are on the stage today. And there was just so much excitement saying, wow, I'm learning so much. Normally we have no dialogue about this at a telco conference. So really just that education and alignment is really important.
Would you say though, it's since you started that it's, and I guess like, I mean, your view has also changed because now you do have that reputation, that client list, but say you were to start out now, do you think that large corporates are actually interested in products built by startups?
For sure. And I think the way that you need to do it is, again, show the business value. So if you're two people in an apartment or in a garage, that's not enough to get someone to listen to you. But if you have a unique position on the angle with data-driven research to back that up, that someone at a bigger company doesn't see, they'll understand that value. But again, you need to put it in their terms. So you can't just go and have a conversation at a coffee shop with them. You have to essentially present something that would be of the caliber that used to be presented on how they can save magnitudes of money. It has to be in the tens of millions of dollars. It can't be, in the few like little things. Think big, think big.
Okay, so like speak their language, student of the industry, good governance.
Yeah.
Don't, be like, well, break things, move fast, and whether you like it or not, sometimes you have to actually kind of like speak their language a little bit, and even if you are trying to break things and move fast.
Exactly, and the biggest thing is that fast for a large company, whether it's government, financial services, media, et cetera, that could be a 2 years time span. Fast for a startup is maybe a day. So I think that you need to understand that if you're working in a big opportunity, it's going to take years. And for us, if you look at our growth, we were founded in 2009. We signed up our first customer in 2010, didn't launch till 2011. So if you looked at us, our first 2 years, we almost had no growth compared to a lot of companies. We were only 8 people. But that laid the groundwork for us to have explosive growth north of 100% year over year for the following 5 years, and today, really because of that groundwork that we did in the early days.
Cool. Okay, we're out of time, so thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
I need some traction. You need some traction.